Welcome to Wide Angle. Our subject today is the new overtures that have been made by the government in China to the new government in Delhi. Yesterday, we had Premier Lee on a telephone call to Prime Minister Modi, and we have a foreign minister's visit coming up very shortly to discuss the rationale behind these new overtures and the prospects that it opens up. We have two experts in the studio with us, Ambassador Nalin Surie, who has spent a large part of his diplomatic career dealing with China and was our ambassador to China a few years ago, and Professor Kondapalli, Professor of Chinese Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. Welcome to both of you. If I may start with you, Ambassador Surie, what do you make of this new initiative, Premier Lee's telephone call? He's taking the initiative to put in this call. And what do we know about what transpired during this conversation?
I think it's important for our listeners to bear in mind that just as India attaches a lot of importance to its relations with China, so do the Chinese. We often forget that. And the importance of a stable, strong government in New Delhi and the implications of such a government are not lost on the Chinese, just as they're not lost on anybody else. And ever since the beginning of this century, the 21st century, the relationship between India and China has progressed, perhaps not as fast as many of us would have liked, but it has progressed very substantially. And there are both commonalities, there's competition, and I think you'll notice that ever since the new leadership took charge in China, the Xi Jinping, Li Keqiang team, they have gone out of their way to make overtures to India. So the importance of India in the Chinese scheme of things has been growing, especially with the new government. And there's reason for that. We may decry our own low growth rate and our own internal problems, but I think the Chinese fully understand the potential that exists in India, potential that has actually seen reality just a few years ago in high growth rates, sustainable development, etc. The importance of the role that India can play in the Asia Pacific region, particularly in the light of the new geostrategic changes that are taking place and the so-called US pivot and other aspects. So I think it's not surprising, at least to me, that the Chinese are taking interest and have reached out to our new government. Please recall that they laid out the red carpet for the previous Prime Minister when he went to China last year. It was not necessary for that visit to have taken place, but they made it happen, and they made it happen in such a way that he goes away with a very good impression.
Absolutely.
And the impression was it's not simply a gesture to Dr. Manmohan Singh, it was a gesture to India also.
So, Professor Kondapalli, is this part of the Chinese acceptance or the Chinese assertion of the Asian century and the fact that they see also a role for India in that, an acceptance of that fact?
Well, the last week's conclusion of the fourth Conference on Interactions in Confidence Building Measures in Asia in Shanghai, the meeting in which President Xi Jinping had suggested that a new security architecture in Asia should come up.
Yes.
Secretary West was representative of India in this conference.
From the Foreign Ministry.
From the Ministry of External Affairs. And he had stated in his speech about the prospects of Asian countries coming together. Obviously, there are several other factors which have contributed to this new initiative towards the Asian countries coming together. As you have already mentioned about the continental and the maritime Silk Road initiatives.
We'll come to that, but let me first focus on one key outcome. It was decided that Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi would pay a quick visit. I think the date has been announced, it's 8th of June. This is an unscheduled visit in a sense, it's an initiative. And later in the year, there are also going to be opportunities for Prime Minister Modi to meet President Xi, first at the BRICS summit in Brazil in the month of July, possibly at the UN General Assembly, and certainly at the G20 in November, maybe at the East Asia Summit. So there are plenty of opportunities for engagement at the highest level. But I'm sure Foreign Minister Wang Yi will be coming with specific proposals, given the fact that we have these high-level exchanges, possible high-level exchanges later in the year. So what is the kind of agenda do you think Foreign Minister Wang Yi, you have known him personally?
Yeah, I have had the pleasure of working with Foreign Minister Wang Yi. In fact, he has a fairly long history of working with India. He was the DG and then Assistant Foreign Minister and subsequently Vice
dealing with India?
With Asia. In fact, the visit of Premier Vajpayee in 2003 was handled by him at his end, and we handled it at our end. He knows India well. He is also an Asia expert. He is also a Japan expert. But I think his visit is important because he will also be meeting our new Foreign Minister, who I think is herself a major personality in the new government. They will, and she's not new in China. I think people must not forget that during the NDA government there was a lot of interaction with China, including at the ministerial level. One of the major issues I think that will be discussed is of course the boundary issue. After all, we will now have a new special representative for the boundary talks since the current NSA has stepped down. I presume that the NSA on the SR on the Chinese side will remain State Councillor Yang Jiechi. But I think perhaps the most important aspect which may be discussed, and I may be speculating a bit here, is a possible visit by President Xi Jinping to India.
Also, in addition to the other,
I frankly do not attach too much importance to the visits, to the meetings on the sidelines of these multilateral regional summits. They are important. They get they're an opportunity for leaders to get together.
Absolutely.
But you cannot really go into substance in these meetings. So in that sense, it's very important that our new Prime Minister.
So there are prospects for a full-scale bilateral visit.
Well, I'm speculating because there was talk of this already earlier in the year that I had heard of. I don't work for the government, so I can't really say anymore. But I think it is the turn of President Xi Jinping to come to India, and I think
he would like to do it sooner rather than later.
Well, I think so. Because it's important. I think for the Chinese to get to work with the new government in Delhi as quickly as possible, as substantively as possible.
So that could be one item on Foreign Minister Wang Yi's agenda. Professor Kondapalli, what would be other items? You talked of confidence building measures and President Xi's call for an Asian security architecture. How do you think the Chinese government or the Chinese authorities visualize this Asian security architecture? What kind of ideas do they have in their mind?
Well, it's not very clear as of now with this statement by President Xi at the Shanghai summit meeting. But I think Foreign Minister Wang Yi's visit will be procedural as well as in relation to approaching the new government. Procedural in the sense that we have seen before that the foreign ministers have discussed the preparatory work that is necessary for the G20 process, the East Asian Summit, in which we have between the two foreign ministries a dialogue process at the East Asian Summit. Then we also have the BRICS Summit, as you mentioned, in which there is, especially in terms of the Syrian developments or the Iranian developments, there has been a discussion related to these issues before. And I think Mr. Wang Yi's visit will include those issues as well, as you just mentioned about the Brazilian meeting, the Naypyidaw in Burma, as well as in Brisbane related to the G20. Given the fact that we have a lot of commonalities in opposing trade protectionism, climate change related issues, and in terms of the United Nations Security Council, on Iran, on Syria, and possibly Ukraine related issues will also be discussed during Mr. Wang Yi's
Yes, of course.